while we go through this one, because as you can see, it's 3 hours and 8 minutes long, I am either going to not cover the whole thing, or I'm going to have to break it up into several parts because, God, there's so much packed into this. And I'm only about 5 minutes in. There's so much packed into this, you guys. It's like, oh my God. First of all, folks, all of you who believe that you need to set your babies down at the night and let them cry themselves to sleep, pay attention. By the way, when I was a little girl, my grandfather installed a lock on my door so that I could be locked in my room if I was crying. And I think that was installed on my brother's door too. Our boomer generation parents made a lot of mistakes. It's not like I don't think they were reading What to Expect When You're Expecting, or like, I don't think that they were getting the kind of parental advice they needed to, especially the me generation. They just were not, they were focused far more on their own desires, their own wants and needs, versus actually, they thought that neglect was part of raising kids. They did. And in some cases, obviously, in cases like this, it was much more severe. This poor child dies at 10 months old. I don't know how yet, but we're going to get there, I guess. But it also can create such mental health problems for your children that they could end up being criminals as they grow up. And the last video I shared, that was a true crime video, was, I mean, chilling to the bone. That little girl was so severely abused. Like I said, this is going way above and beyond your standard boomer generation sort of let them cry themselves to sleep. The last video I shared, that little girl was severely molested. I would go as far as calling it rape, because there was penetration involved, before she was like a year and a half old, and developed such psychological issues with it, such detachment issues, antisocial disorder, and so on and so forth, that she was stealing knives out of the kitchen, and they had to lock her in a room just so she wouldn't come in the middle of the night and try and kill any of her relatives, especially her little brother, who she herself was molesting. That was a terrifying story. And it took years of therapy for that girl to get to even a barely normal place. And it wasn't even normal yet, right? But it took years of intense therapy, of telling her, she had to be separated from her family. She was instructed to do everything. She could not do anything without being told that it was acceptable, because she had to learn how to relate to other people and how to follow instruction. And so even asking for a glass of water, she had to ask for a glass of water. She was not given the freedom to go and get a glass of water, because they were going through a reprogramming phase with her. She was trying to kill her brother. She was molesting her brother. She was, um, a very young child masturbating in public. Anyway, point being, we've seen a lot of changes of how people parent over the years, and our parents, the boomers, called us helicopter cops, because we were spending more time with our kids, volunteering for our kids, not making them cry themselves to sleep. And so our parents, the generation before us, were giving us a hard time like we were wimps. Mm-mm. And the Gen Xers were the generation who started asking questions about spanking. Is this really the right way to proceed? And so our children are less likely to actually spank their children at this point. I'm a grandma now, so anyway, let's go through this one. It's probably going to take me several parts.
That if the children fell ill, it was because that was God's plan for them. It's imperative to note that the couple's extreme religious beliefs...
Yes, I would advise you to be careful what you say from here on out. You will answer to the Lord for everything that is said against me.
Parental neglect.
See, and also there's the religious aspect to this as well. And he's also going to get into the fact that these were conservative Republicans.
Can have a devastating impact on a person's psyche, more so than many people are able to realize. How an infant and child's needs are met in their early lives is paramount to how they will understand the world around them, and the adverse effects of parental neglect can last well into adulthood, impacting an individual's mental health, relationships, and overall well-being. From a very early age, children develop attachment styles based on how their primary caregivers respond to their basic needs. For example, if a child trusts that their parent will appear when they are needed, that when they cry, their caregiver will be there to comfort, clean, and feed them, they likely will be more trusting in the world at large. But when a child's caregiver consistently neglects or rejects them, they may develop an insecure attachment style, which can lead to difficulties in forming healthy relationships later in life. That is because the child learns that their needs will not be met by their caregiver, leading to a lack of trust in others and the world around them. A child's...
Well, this can also happen as we grow and try and have romantic relationships with people. If they're unavailable and they are not meeting our needs, we still end up experiencing trust issues, right? If they don't value us the same way that we value them, we end up having trust issues.
Sense of self-worth is also heavily influenced by their relationship with their parents. More specifically, when a mother neglects or rejects her child, it can lead to feelings of worthlessness and inadequacy. A child may feel that they are not deserving of love and attention, leading to low self-esteem and an overall negative self-image. When a child's primary caregiver fails to provide basic needs, such as food, shelter, and love, it can lead to a lack of trust in the world around them. This can manifest as difficulty forming close relationships, or feeling unsafe in the world, and struggling with anxiety and depression. The child may also experience a sense of hopelessness and helplessness, feeling that they are unable to control their own lives. Early experiences of neglect can impact a child's brain development, leading to difficulties with emotional regulation, as well as cognitive processing and impulse control. These difficulties can persist into adulthood and impact a person's ability to function in daily life. The child may struggle with regulating their emotions, leading to outbursts of anger, depression, and anxiety. They may also struggle with decision-making and problem-solving, leading to difficulties in school, work, and relationships. Children who experience parental neglect are at increased risk for developing mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, and substance abuse disorders. These issues can persist into adulthood, impacting a person's ability to function in daily life and their overall quality of life. However, in today's case, that child would never make it out of their childhood. Welcome back to another episode of Dreading, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Today we are going to be covering the case of Mary Welch and going over the facts of what this child was forced to endure. This video came recommended by a subscriber who lived near the Welch-Fusari household in Michigan, where this took place, who felt like Mary's life was quickly...
This is so sad too, because, I think that there was a child in my neighborhood who was severely abused somehow. But I don't know the specifics of it, because I used to do a lot of babysitting when I was roughly in this 5th, 6th grade, 7th grade, right? Made pretty good money for the 80s, $5 an hour. But one of the girls that I was asked to babysit many, many, many times, she was about 6. She was inappropriate. There was some, sexual stuff going on with her that she was displaying in front of me, and I was too young to know what to do about that or who to tell about it. And I didn't have the best relationship with my own parents either. They were very distant, so it wasn't like I could go to them and say, hey, you know what, I'm seeing this weird shit whenever I go over to this house and babysit. She also had an infant sister that, so I had to spend most of my time with the baby, making sure her diaper was clean and making sure she was getting fed and stuff. Whereas the older child, who was about 6 or 7 at the time, I expected that she could watch a Disney movie or something on the VHS while I was babysitting. And I was too young at the time to be able to identify what's wrong with children. You know what I mean? My understanding, based on what my neighborhood friends have told me, is that at some point she committed suicide. But I was no longer in touch with her, so I have no idea what the circumstances are. All I know is that there were rumors that the parents were probably doing cocaine or something, but her behavior, in hindsight, looking back on this, her behavior indicated some level of sexual abuse.
Forgotten in the subsequent years. As always, it's my hope to cover this case with as much care and respect as possible, although little information is available. Usually in cases such as this, I take time to discuss the personality and life of the victim. However, given Mary died when she was just 10 months old, and the only people who knew her were the people who would end her life, there is very little here. With all of that said, if there's a video you would like to see on this channel, or a case you would like to see given more attention to, email my brother and I at dreading.official@gmail.com. With all of that said, let us begin.
Well, thank you for that.
Seth Welch grew up in a conservative Christian family and had a strict upbringing. He served in the military and later worked as a truck driver. Tatiana Fusari, on the other hand, had a troubled childhood and had been in and out of foster care. She struggled with drug addiction and had been arrested several times. Despite their difficult pasts, Seth and Tatiana married and had 3 children, including Mary Ann. However, their marriage...
By the way, some dudes specifically target women like her because they're looking for a submissive. And they feel that they can have more control over the relationship.
Marriage was tumultuous, with frequent arguments and physical altercations. They also had a strained relationship with Seth's family, who disapproved of their lifestyle and parenting. Seth and Tatiana's neglect of their children was made obvious before their children were born, as neither party changed their lifestyle to accommodate their pregnancies. Tatiana continued to drink and smoke weed as often as possible, usually with her husband. Likewise, whenever the pair fought, Seth had no issue putting his hands on his wife during that time, with him reportedly claiming that pregnant women wanting special treatment was sexist. When their eldest child was born, they were found to have significant amounts of THC in their system, and the couple was then immediately reported to Child Protective Services, where they stayed on their radar for years. None of the couple's 3 children had ever been to a doctor in their short lives, with Seth claiming that going to the doctor was just as dangerous as not going to one. He didn't trust the medical system.
Anti-vax pieces of shit. One of the other videos I covered where the mother had 10 children and she and her boyfriend killed her autistic 5-year-old. Starved him, beat him up, broke bones. Oh my God, even. In that situation, they had a social worker who was regularly checking on them. And she was bribing the social worker by giving her food, the food stamps that she was entitled to for her kids. She was starving her kids, feeding them peanut butter sandwiches with cockroaches in them. It was a filthy situation. And she was literally bribing the social worker. I hope that social worker went to jail too. They never said what happened to the social worker, but we seriously, we do have a problem with our government services like that, because they're not funded enough, they're not regulated enough, and clearly they're not doing enough for children in danger.
and earnestly believed that if the children fell ill, it was because that was God's plan for them. It's imperative to note that the couple's extreme religious beliefs, as they were categorized in the media and in all the information available about this case, seemed only to be used to justify their child neglect and extreme abuse. Seth did have a YouTube channel where he posted about his own beliefs. The adults who had gone to the hospital and taken medicine, which they had claimed was against the Word of God. They used and perverted religious teaching to validate their behavior, but rarely followed the teachings themselves, as they didn't want to change their behavior. Despite the couple's decision to grow their family, they didn't care for their children in the slightest. They seemed to view them as leeches, taking away from their resources and giving nothing back. In statements given by relatives later on, they reportedly claimed that their children were lazy, and their lack of contribution to the household made them hard to deal with. Seth and Tatiana seemed to believe that if their infant children wanted to live in their house and eat their food, they needed to pay rent. Seth and Tatiana viewed their children as being needy, lazy slugs, often remarking on their children's antics to those around them, and in response to their, quote, poor behavior, they would withhold their children's basic needs. Water, food, and other necessities were taken away from their young offspring, to the point where, on numerous occasions, their older children would be forced to eat grass and dirt. This neglect and horrendous abuse was all that Mary had ever known. Reports had been made about the parents countless times by relatives, with many concerned about their well-being, but nothing was ever done. That is until August 2nd, 2018. Mary was found severely malnourished and dehydrated, with bruises and bed sores on her body. Her eyes were sunken in, and she was visibly underweight. She had been neglected to the point of starvation, and her death was a result of their failure to provide her with the basic care and support she needed.
And these are the same conservatives who also don't believe in reproductive rights, abortion, using contraceptives. They have no business being parents. They have absolutely no business being parents. You don't bring a child into the world. Oh, I'm going to look at that later. That looks good. I love The Daily Show, you guys. They have absolutely no business being parents whatsoever. But they're the same sort of people who are like, oh shit, I'm pregnant again. Guess gotta have the baby because I don't believe in abortion. Right?
When she was found by her parents, they, seemingly unaware that her death had been directly caused by their action, or rather inaction, called their lawyer to see what the next step was. An hour and a half later, they called the police.
How long did you find the child? It's about an hour and a half. I was waiting. I called my lawyer first thing to ask, what's the next thing I could do. And they said, wait till they're here to call, the police and get that going. Basically, it got to the point where I was waiting so long, I kind of went ahead and did it anyway. And they're almost here, so I was waiting on legal counsel. So you found the child an hour and a half ago? Yeah. And called your lawyer first, correct? Yeah.
Oh my God.
Okay. Are there any other children in the home right now? Yeah. Because I don't know if I'm supposed to call the police or not. I have no idea what to do. Okay. Well, we'll send someone out. We're going to investigate. When was the last time you had contact with a child? Last night, yesterday afternoon, about 3 p.m. She goes to bed, and, that was that.
Yesterday
at 3 p.m.? Yeah, and then this morning at 10 something.
Oh my God, you guys. Do the clock on that one. She put a 10-month-old baby to bed at 3 p.m. and did not check on her again until the next morning. I hope they locked her up for the rest of her life because that's some bullshit.
He finally went in to check on her, like, okay, it's been way too long, so, yeah. It's because it's long all the time, it's normal and stuff. So you're saying it's normal for your children to sleep from around 3 p.m. till 10 a.m.? Usually about 9:30, yeah. So, they sleep from 3 p.m. to, I'm just saying, he basically keeps them, he's up for a half hour after that, and then he goes out for bed. And how old are the other children? 4 and 2. There's 2 other children? Yeah. And they're at home right now, right? Yep. And you said when you found her, she was already believed to be deceased, right? Yeah. And that's when you consulted with a lawyer? Yeah. And you believe she was beyond help already? Oh, yeah. She was dead at the door.
When officers arrived on the scene, they found the home, Mary, and the other children in horrendous condition. The children were covered in dirt and feces, with it being clear they hadn't been washed in a long time. The house itself was also disgusting, with vermin, insects, and mold found throughout. The couple presented themselves as somewhat grieving parents, and claimed that they had no idea what had happened to their youngest child, that they had simply woken up and found her body. Seth stated that Mary was skinny, but she wasn't sick, and she had been eating, quote, the good stuff right before her death. But it was clear that was not the case.
Wow. Oh my God.
As always, there will be timestamps down below if you would like to skip these interrogations. After Mary's death, both Seth and Tatiana were brought in for questioning and separated. Though the pair had talked to a lawyer prior to the questioning and had time to discuss how they were going to frame Mary's death, there was no foreseeable way to make the extreme neglect that their child lived through seem reasonable. But they are fully unaware of this. The filth that they forced their children to live in, and the extreme duress they had them live under, is what Seth and Tatiana believed was normal, or so close to normal that Mary dying can easily be pushed under the rug, but that is far from reality. The interrogation began with Tatiana, with Seth being left alone, completely isolated for the duration. While this was most likely done due to lack of personnel, the interrogators wanted to place as much stress on Seth as possible. Leaving him alone with the knowledge that his wife is being interviewed right next door should have been incredibly nerve-wracking and emotional, especially given their youngest child's untimely death. But his response is anything but. Let's watch.
Different rooms.
Hi. Tatiana, this is my supervisor. We've seen each other, but I don't think we've met. I'm sorry for your loss. I know that obviously the last thing you want to be doing is this. So we haven't spoke yet. I know you've already spoken with Jason. My name is Jason as well. But some of the same stuff that I gotta turn this brain off. Some of the same stuff that he's already talked about. I wasn't there when you guys spoke, so I'd like to go over some of it. Obviously, he's already advised you of your constitutional rights. Up at the scene, you still remember those rights. It's,
Thank you for clarifying.
yep, no problem. Do you want me to read them to you again, or you're still good to go? All right. Like I told you, you're not under arrest, but because you're in this fine facility, we do like to just remind you of those. So, really, what I kind of just like to do is just to get a better understanding of how we are here today, and kind of go back a few years even, just to get to know you and your family a little bit. So,
Okay.
do you go by Tatiana, or do you have a nickname?
Tatiana.
Tatiana? Okay.
Nickname from really seem to work.
You couldn't just give us an easy nickname. No, I'm just kidding. I mean,
By the way, presumably they both had cell phones, right? So one of them could have called 911 when they discovered that Mary was dead, and the other one could have called the attorney at the same time, knowing that they're probably going to be in trouble as neglectful parents, right? They could have handled both of those things at the same time, but those dumbass bitches fucking called their attorney and waited an hour and a half before calling for medical attention for their infant baby. Oh my God.
children do you have?
Sorry. 5,
3?
3.
Okay. Yep. All right.
This woman is not crying because she killed her daughter. She is crying because she knows she's in a hell of a lot of trouble right now.
The interrogator does not believe Tatiana's emotion at this present moment. He's been made aware of the horrific details of the living environment and knows that she went without basic care from her parents. It's not like Tatiana and Seth were unable to take care of their children or didn't have access to food, as they both have clearly not gone without themselves. So the concept that she is only now upset at the circumstances rings a bit false. His body language and
I know, look at how fat that motherfucker is in the other window. And she's clearly not a skinny woman herself. And these motherfuckers were starving their kids? For real?
tone never changes, and he doesn't attempt to give her any kind of validation or comfort. The immediate portion after Tatiana's emotional outburst has been redacted due to private information about the other children being discussed, which is understandable. However, because of this, we cannot hear if she continued to present herself as being on the brink of tears.
And Mary. Okay. How old is your oldest?
4.
And your
Why? This is redacted?
okay. So, at the scene there, I was told that verbal. Is that true that he doesn't, or he's very verbal?
He's very verbal.
I don't know. Someone, and you know how he gets mixed. You whisper in one person's ear and as it goes down the chain. Maybe he was just being shy. So
He tends to get shy. But
yeah, he did some high fiving for me, but
he knows lots of words. He's just sometimes big sister can be a little dominating. So
maybe that's what it is.
But
and probably all the commotion probably really made him shy. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to. So maybe they were just saying he was nonverbal right now. Maybe that's what it was.
possibly.
She immediately blamed another child for the fact that one of her children has not developed language skills. I hope y'all caught that. This is probably because
Medical issues or any.
they're probably redacting this because they're dropping the names of the kids, and they got to protect the identity of the other kids that lived, right?
Like that? Okay.
Not at all.
And
Tatiana confidently saying that none of her kids have medical issues is a farce. As noted, none of her children have ever gone to see a doctor or a medical professional after birth, and it's
Right.
likely this choice was made to hide their abuse. Child Protective Services became involved with the family after THC was found in their eldest child's system after they were born, and it's likely that they knew taking the children to a doctor would just cause them more problems.
or is she in any kind of daycare? Does she go to preschool?
No, I homeschool. I have my degree in early
my
childhood
God.
Oh, you do?
education,
Okay.
so I
Good for you.
By the way, I'm fairly certain that several of the children in my neighborhood are also getting homeschooled. And look, you know what? If you live in a rural area, you're in a like farmland and shit, I can understand why you might want to homeschool, because maybe it's really far to get them to public school. Maybe you don't have very good resources in your immediate area. And if you're an educated person, you could probably do a better job of educating your children, so long as you're actually going to do it, right? So long as you're going to actually do it. But you live in a white, affluent, suburban neighborhood like where I am. There is no fucking reason your kids should be homeschooled other than we were trying to get through a pandemic. But according to Biden, the pandemic is over now, right? And most of you who have been homeschooling your kids actually didn't believe it was a real pandemic anyway, because you want to abuse your kids too. Pandemic bullshit. Anti-vax, fucking over-the-top religious pieces of shit. All right, let's go.
just from being at home at the farm, I can at least give them an initial education before
Mhm.
Yeah.
we decide to send them off
Right.
to the grade school.
Because you're real
Absolutely.
smart, right? You're real
So,
smart.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Like, and what kind of stuff?
She is fluent in her alphabet, her numbers at least up to 20. Although she knows other numbers like 160, but not fluent. She's practicing her writing. She just has a little issue with the numbers. They get a little backwards. But she knows how to spell words like hi, cat, dog. She knows the word that starts with E.
She probably do better than Jason. The high and the cat and dog part. So does
from my own memories, I think that I was more advanced than that, and so was everybody else in my class in kindergarten. We had a book that we took out every week and had to write full, complete sentences in addition to learning basic math and cutting in a straight line and doing art projects. So it sounds like she's trying to get this accomplished for one child out of three, right? And clearly they didn't go to preschool, right? So they had no up advantage to even get into the kind of curriculum that you would have at age 5. And she's like, well, she can spell cat. Well, can she write a whole sentence? Because we were already doing that in kindergarten when it was like 1979, 1980, you guys.
Does she have a primary doctor?
Not anymore. We
Okay.
did have,
Not anymore?
it's great and everything. We just, we only go if there's an issue, and there just hasn't been.
Well, good.
Right.
Tatiana is a brilliant liar. She is confident, poised, and prepared, and doesn't appear to be nervous in the slightest bit. What she just said is a complete and utter falsehood. But more than that, the very concept that her children only go to a medical professional when they have an issue, and they simply have never had any medical issues prior to Mary's death, is absurd. The 2 other children were found to be completely malnourished, to the point where their bodies couldn't fight any potential illness. But, from Tatiana's point of view, that is completely acceptable.
Wow. Okay. Oh, okay. So they redacted this because it's irrelevant. They're probably trying to build rapport, right? Move on.
6 times. We'll do 4 to 6 if you want.
Okay, and so at what visit, obviously it was probably the last visit, is when he recommended the helmet, the head shaping. But so there was never any concern about the shape of her head from 0 to 18 months?
No, that's why it was such a concern for us as to why he would just bring this up out of nowhere. And
So what was the problem with the shape of her head according to
he
him?
said it was off. It was just not circular. And I mean, I wasn't offended. I was just taken aback. And
That happens when you don't pick somebody up if they're lying in bed, especially for an infant, right? Because they have the soft spot at the top of their head, and so if they are not picked up and kind of encouraged to learn how to roll over and start crawling and stand up, and you have to work with your kids. You can't just like put them in the crib all day and expect that things are going to turn out normal. And your skull is not going to form the correct shape if you're lying down all day, especially as an infant, because you have a soft spot on the top of your head. And the skull form, and the whole reason, the biological reason that infants have a soft spot is because during a natural birth, they have to go through a pretty tight space to get out of the womb, right? And so oftentimes children will come out with like cone heads because their head gets squeezed on the way out. With C-sections, you'll have like a perfect shaped skull. But it's not going to stay that way if you are not attentive to your child.
I just found out that it's commission-based for these products that they try and push.
Oh,
wow. So
mm-hmm.
We don't know specifically. This is hearsay.
Sure.
But we think that
We'll
he's
accept it.
trying to push the helmet. It was a $3,000 helmet.
Oh my God.
That called CPS and said that we were being neglectful or something or other.
Tatiana's complete inability to see her own fault in her actions is incredibly disturbing to watch. Let's think about what she just said for a moment. While
Yeah.
sitting in an interrogation room discussing the death of her youngest daughter, which was caused by her own neglect, she is trying to claim that the medical issue that one of her children faced was a farce, made up by a doctor who was trying to earn a commission. She then directly states, with absolutely no sense of irony, that after Seth and her decided not to fix the issue, this doctor accused them of child neglect. She is entirely unaware of what her words are actually saying. Instead of showing her to be a smart, compassionate mother who was suffering a tremendous loss at the present moment, Tatiana is showcasing how extreme neglect, especially for medical issues, is a pattern in their household, that neither her or Seth actually care for their children, and that they ignore advice given to them by medical professionals because they believe they simply know better. Unless their doctor was an incredibly corrupt, vindictive person, which is unlikely, they wouldn't report a family for potential child neglect if they didn't earnestly believe that was occurring. And given that the family already had a case with CPS, medical professionals would be looking for indicators, which they no doubt found, given the family's history. Within minutes of this interview starting, Tatiana has told the police that they have a long documented history of child neglect, but does it so confidently that it seems as if she believes she has just exonerated herself.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Yes.
How does that work?
Wonderful.
Was that a choice?
Yeah.
Was that like what do they call it, like a midwife or something?
Yes, it was a home birth.
Okay,
I
so
had a midwife.
how does that work when you choose to have? First off, I mean, why did you go from being from her in a hospital and some transformation here where you said we want to do the midwife? Yeah.
Yeah. Being at the hospital was very invasive. They with me after she was born. They wanted her out of the room. They wanted us there for 3 days because apparently I pushed out a lot more fluid than they were expecting.
This is untrue, but goes to show what a serial liar Tatiana is. As mentioned, when doctors checked, they found drugs in her daughter's system. They reported this to CPS, who then had to fully investigate Seth and Tatiana to determine if they were fit to be parents. Tatiana determining that this was invasive and wrong for the doctors to do, that shows her inability to see fault within herself. Any report to CPS has to be false, because she is a good mother who would never hurt her children. A doctor determining that she might be neglectful has to be done out of spite, because she would never do that. And the fact that she is saying this to police while in an interrogation room after the death of her child from neglect is absurd. The interrogators continue to ask Tatiana questions about her home birth, her midwives, and other topics completely unrelated to Mary's death in order to get her to let her guard down and feel as comfortable as possible talking to them. Whenever they note a particular subject matter seems to spark her interest, they stay on that for a while, allowing her to continue talking for as long as she wants. All of the sorrow and emotion that she had at the beginning of the interview quickly goes away, and she becomes incredibly confident and self-assured throughout, as if she has completely forgotten why she is there. I'm going to fast forward through that portion of the interrogation, but a link will be available down below if you want to see it in full.
So she coughed. Like, oh, we need to keep her for testing. And then I just think it's because they just wanted to charge us more. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Conspiracy theory, yada yada, whatever.
Yeah, they never know though, right?
Exactly,
Right.
you know. So I just think they wanted to keep us there for 3 more days, and then they wouldn't allow me to see her except to nurse, and they were saying, oh, you can just keep her here. Don't worry, you can rest. I want to see my baby.
Yeah.
And they would have WIC come in and give me information, and you want to have newborn portraits? No, can I just go home?
Right.
So we just didn't want any more.
So that just turned you off to the.
And having a home birth right after I gave birth, Seth went out and bought me a pizza, and I ate that whole pizza.
Bonus.
No, that's actually relevant because clearly she and her husband were eating while they were starving their kids. So if you consider that irrelevant, I disagree with you, because that's incredibly relevant that she and her husband were porking it out while they were starving their kids.
Was at 4 months, was she developing well? Was she getting to be a roly-poly? How did your kids develop?
Dude, she wouldn't even know, because obviously she didn't have a pediatrician, so she didn't even know what the milestones were, like whether or not her children were meeting the standard milestones. I knew, because I was documenting it in a book, I knew that my son was not only meeting but exceeding milestones.
Every child's different, I know that, but
Tatiana's eager nod is strange, given the circumstances. None of her children had been developing well. They were underfed and malnourished. They would not be developing like a normal child and would have been incredibly far behind. But Tatiana is entirely unable to recognize that. She is eager to talk about how her now deceased child and explain why Mary was actually fine the entire time.
They all were very engaging and active. And yes, roly-poly is a great way to describe all of them, actually.
Okay.
The only thing they were late on was walking.
Okay. So, would you say like chubby cheeks and...
It blocked out the sound again.
That was she always thinner?
She was always petite.
Always petite.
Yeah, she was never, nothing chunky about her, just...
But nothing concerning either.
No.
So she was still fitting into the size diapers and
Yes,
stuff.
absolutely.
So because I mean, I've got kids too, but I probably much like Seth, I didn't do most of the diaper shopping. But I know there's like months. Like there's the zero, the infant, or the newborn, and then it goes like what?
1, 2, 3.
So that's based on months, right? So it'll say like 0 to 3 months or something like that, or does it say 3 to 6 months? Is it not like that
0 to
anymore?
3 months, it's usually 5, still newborn. And
Oh,
then
still,
3 to
okay.
6 would be 5 to 1.
So when she was 3 to 6, was she wearing?
Dude, my son was always like way ahead of the diaper schedule. It's shocking to me to see people do this to their kids. Absolutely shocking. My son was always ahead of the diaper schedule. I was constantly having to get larger sizes. He was growing. He was definitely the same size as the other kids in his preschool when I finally got it. Like when I started getting him to the point where he'd have like daycare or preschool, he was definitely the same size as the other kids. They generally are. The only reason you're going to be really small is if you're not getting fed. And that's bizarre as crap that anybody would do that to their kid.
Size 1, 3 to 6?
Yeah, she was good with her diapers.
Okay, so even though she was petite, she was still growing into the age-appropriate diapers.
Yeah, she was very tall.
Okay.
And
even her clothes, like her 2Ts and 4T toddler stuff, was she age-appropriate with the sizes that she was growing into?
yeah, we in fact had to get larger because she was so long.
Oh, but they weren't so baggy that they were falling off from her?
No,
Okay.
not until,
Good.
actually not at all. She finally started to fit them fully when she
Yeah.
was maybe a year.
Okay.
And that's
All right.
when,
Did you see the contradiction there? Oh my god. She fit them fully when she was a year. Okay, well, once you start getting your kids to about a year old, you're going to start working on potty training at that point. They're walking now, right? You've got your potty chair out for them, and you're training them on potty training. But you've got your kid in diapers that she has not been fitting. She has not been fitting her diapers. And now she's finally, at a year old, starting to fit her diapers. Very interesting.
yeah. They don't-
But now, feeding, he turned into a chunker for a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. And obviously he grew out of that. And so was he still age appropriate, or did he kind of go an age or two over where he should have
He was
been?
a tad over.
Okay.
Not in the diaper sense. But, I mean, right now he's wearing 3T to 4T diapers. But that's because they're the pull-up ones.
Yeah.
I'm trying to encourage potty training.
Yo, good.
But his clothes right now are 3T.
Well, so he is over then, yeah.
Yeah, but he's going to be 3 soon, and I just don't want him to put his arms up, have his belly out. So
Well, plus you want to buy him lunch. You want him to last more than a week.
Yeah.
At that age, they're just sprouting out. So you didn't work. When did you go back to work? About-ish.
February of this past year.
Of this year or 17? This is 2018?
Yes.
So this age?
And that's when I started working at McDonald's.
Okay. And so, February? Sorry. So,
17th, actually.
so from October 23rd to November 23rd, to December to January to February. So basically, the first 4 full months, she was fresh from the source, breastfed as well. Mm-hmm. Okay. And same story. If you went somewhere, she went with you. Yeah. Seth never had to feed her.
No.
So for 4 months, anyway. He never fed her.
No.
Okay.
No way. Not that he couldn't. I just
no. Well, why? Yeah, if you're right there.
That's actually like a really good point to bring up because she clearly is heavy set, right? She's got some body fat on her, so she had a 10-month-old baby die in her custody when she could have been breastfeeding. She didn't even have to pay for food. She literally could have been breastfeeding that child and giving her all of the nutrients she needed, the immunities she needed. I mean, in hindsight, I realize that's probably why my son was advancing faster than than the schedule, because he was getting my breast milk. Not everybody can do that, by the way. Like, some women have a hard time getting the process started, and so they have to use formula. But what the hell was happening here? If she's saying that she was breastfeeding this baby and the baby is malnourished, what the hell?
Yeah. And it was winter, cuddle time.
Cuddle time?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 3 p.m. to 10 a.m.
So, February 17th, you went back to work. Why did you have to go back to work?
To be blunt, just to support the farm.
Yeah, sure.
Give us some startup money.
Because now, you guys used to do fruit farm produce stand, and Seth was saying that just didn't really take off.
Yeah.
So now I was trying to do a U-Pick strawberry thing, and...
So I was pregnant with Mary, taking Elizabeth and John down to farmers markets 4 times a week from 6 to 3.
Oh.
Yeah, it was grueling.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, and having to manage the children and then interact with the customers, and some days were just we didn't pay the gas to go down there. So.
I don't blame you.
U-Pick strawberries this year took off phenomenally, and we're going to expand that way.
So now, is the farm, whose passion is that?
It started out as Seth. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, so I didn't...
Not your passion, then.
Not then.
So, is it your passion now?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is something that Seth wanted, and then you grew to love, or...
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why I work at McDonald's. I wouldn't otherwise.
No, right. So February 17 rolls around, and this month's old. How do you manage feeding them?
Oh, we lost audio.
Refrigerate bottles.
Okay.
Because I was only doing 4-hour shifts at the time, just so they can see my work ethic. So I would do, I would leave 1 bottle out and then 1 bottle in the fridge. And I would the day and then put her down to bed before I left. And that was at 7 o'clock.
So your shift was
7 to 11.
7 p.m. to 11.
Yeah.
So, on a typical day, what time in the morning would be your first feeding with her?
At that time?
At that time.
Maybe 5.
A.M.
3:30. 3:30, and then...
So at 3:30, she would wake up, and would she do a full feeding?
Yes. Although she would fall asleep. So I'd wake her up.
You just keep nudging her?
Oh, yeah.
And now typically speaking, at 3:30, when you woke her up, would she need a diaper change as well?
No.
Okay, so...
She wouldn't. Because she was up at midnight before that, feeding.
So the last feeding for the night would be midnight. Well, let's just start at 3:30. That would give us a good time frame. So at 3:30, there'd be a full feeding, and her diaper was fine. No pee, no poop. She's good.
Yeah, she was fine.
So then, when would be the next feeding?
Between 5 and 6. And that's when I would change her.
And would that be another full feeding?
Yes.
Okay.
And I would change her then, and then...
And when you changed her then, it would be due to...
Urine.
Urine.
And and then the kids would be up too, and then so I'd leave just to be awake with the kids, and the kids would have breakfast while Mary's either eating or sitting in her little bouncy chair looking around, and then
so at 4 months she could sit in her bouncy chair and look around, and
yes,
okay.
she was always able to hold her head up on her own. But it was a little rocker chair, not a bouncy chair, I'm sorry. So she would lean back in it and put batteries in it, and it rocks on itself.
Yes, yeah. So the next feeding, we have a 5 to 6 time frame. The next feeding would have been when, about?
8 to 9.
8 to 9.
Yeah, she would feed every 2 hours, on average.
Every feeding was a full feeding?
Yeah, she was, yeah.
And 8 to 9, how was the diaper?
Depending on the day or how much she ate, I would change her poop 3 times a day.
Okay.
That I made note of.
Okay.
So it's hard to give you specifics on an actual day, but if she didn't poop then, the next time there would be a poop. But it was always 1 in the afternoon.
So either this feeding or the next one is typically a poopy diaper?
Yes.
Okay. And the next feeding was, I know you told me, but I'm not good with the math.
Another 2 hours after that.
So you're thinking 11 to
noonish, because I know she'd eat when the kids would have lunch too.
So noonish.
And then the kids would have their snack around 2, and she'd be eating again.
So I can say that either the 8 to 9 or the noonish feeding was a poopy diaper change.
Yeah. And it was not, I mean, she didn't do solids yet. There wasn't solid poopy yet.
No.
Okay, we're going to pause here for, this will be part 1. But I can tell you one obvious reason that she's fucking lying to you right now. When you're breastfeeding, you have to wear pads. You have to wear a special bra and pads. And the outline of that generally shows through your shirt. When a baby cries, it could be your baby, it could be anybody's baby. Your boobs just start pouring out milk. If you're an actual breastfeeding parent, that's what happens. And that's why you have to wear the pads, you have to wear a special bra. That woman does not look like she is a breastfeeding mother. And I think it would be pretty easy for them to figure out whether or not she is. Whether she's lactating. Because I don't think she is, you guys. I think she's full of shit. I think she was not breastfeeding. There is no way that she's producing enough milk to sustain an infant that died of malnutrition. Not possible. Anyway, this is part 1. I'll see if I can get through some of the rest of it later today. But I'm going to clip it here.